Welcome to Chicago Broadcasting Network, where we showcase multicultural and age-diverse people, art, music, theater, and events. In this episode, contributor Kim Campbell interviews Rockford native and former Chicago resident Wendy Correa, author of My Pretty Baby, a memoir that chronicles the author's healing journey from childhood trauma to ultimately building the peaceful family life she always longed for. Wendy's life changed after escaping her turbulent home by moving to Los Angeles, then eventually Aspen, Colorado, where she became an assistant to famed gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. It was only after her mother's death that Wendy uncovers a painful family secret that finally answers her lifelong question, what really happened to my family? This is Reno Lovison, executive producer at ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com. Let's listen now to this interesting interview with Kim Campbell and the author of My Pretty Baby, Wendy Correa.
My name is Kim Campbell. I'm coming to you from the Chicago Broadcasting Network, and I'm here today with an Illinois girl who I think would also describe herself as coming from a dysfunctional family, Wendy Correa. She has a pretty wide and balanced perspective on life. Whether it's sex, drugs, rock and roll, sweat lodges, Buddhist retreats, cigarettes, yoga training, AA meetings, you name it, Wendy has probably tried it. She spent her life on this journey of self-inquiry, trying to solve the riddle of why she always felt so angst-ridden and unlovable. If that sounds familiar, maybe you've tried a few of these self-care approaches to manage your own grief and anxiety. I know I have. Wendy made it her life mission, and now she's ready to share what she discovered in her new memoir, My Pretty Baby.
Oh, Kim, thank you so much for having me.
I just want to mention that we are old friends, and we have this Chicago connection that goes pretty far back. Do you remember how we met?
We met in a mommy and baby group at a church where we would go for mommy and baby time and some snacks and juices and get the babies to play together and some time for moms to actually have adult conversations somewhat.
It was so important at that phase in our adulting, so I really cherish those memories from back then. And I remember you were kind of like this mover and shaker in the mommy wellness scene.
Well, after I left Los Angeles, where I was in the music industry, I moved to Aspen, Colorado to be a DJ on KSPN FM, and I was a personal assistant to Hunter S. Thompson. And I met my husband. He called into the radio program literally to request a song, and that is how we met. So then he got a job at Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill in downtown Chicago, SOM, who built, the Sears Tower and the John Hancock Building. And he invited me to join him to go to Chicago. And we were married at the Cook County Courthouse in 1994. And then our son Mateo was born in May of 1996. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started getting more and more interested and involved with childbirthing years, and I did a doula training, and I actually attended one of your births.
You did.
You remember?
I remember very clearly.
Yes.
It's kind of a weird coincidence that I also met my life partner because I was a DJ on a radio program and they called in to request a song. Isn't that interesting?
That I didn't know, that I didn't remember. That is amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah. Thinking about your Chicago years, you were here. How long were you here for in Chicago? I know you were born
6 years.
Or raised in Illinois. You were here for 6 years.
Yes.
What does it mean to you in terms of this journey you've been on in understanding your life's purpose? How influential was Chicago on that journey?
Just a side note, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, but I left at 17 and fled to California. But when I came back with Ignacio, my husband, and spent 6 years there, it was an incredibly healing experience for me. First of all, I was 38 years old before I got married. Mateo when he was born was just 2 months shy of my 40th birthday.
Mhm.
And by then, I had done a lot of healing. I had gotten sober and I had done a lot of healing. But ironically, since my parents still lived near Rockford, there was more healing to be done with them.
Mhm.
So I had hoped that my getting married and having Mateo would bring some healing to my family, and I think a little bit it did, but that didn't necessarily last because there were more episodes of family dysfunction and violence within my family that unfortunately occurred. But living in Chicago as an adult with my husband and with the baby that I had so wanted to have my entire life. And meeting people like you and the other people in the baby groups that we attended, and where my son wound up going to preschool, that whole experience was very, very healing for me. And it was really a joyous time for me to be in Chicago, not to mention how incredible Chicago is as a city and all the fun things that we got to do. And we would
Mhm.
go on baby groups, we would go to the museums and we would
Mhm.
have picnics at Grant Park. And, we were able to go to so many wonderful venues with our babies and have a really nice community. And Mateo went to Hoyne Street Playgroup. I don't know if it's still around, but it was quite an institution before we started there. So I love coming back to Chicago, and I'm so glad that you and I reconnected.
Me too. Yeah. And when I reflect back on those days, I have really great memories of being with you and your family and with Mateo and your partner, Ignacio. I think about you then, and what I remember is, you were such a great friend, but you also were really kind of confident in your role, kind of starting to build your brand, in yoga and kind of like being a mommy and me yoga instructor, prenatal. And you were starting to be a doula as well, which is why you got to help with my second birth. All of this was like kind of a really important part on your journey, but you were sort of coming into your own at that point, I think, which is really great. Glad I got to meet you at that part in your life. Although when I read your memoir, I thought, okay, I would have really had some fun with the teenage Wendy because there's a lot of overlapping kind of adventures in that. Uh,
Right.
what made you decide to write a memoir?
Well, um, I realized that my family's dysfunction and secrets had written my biography and hence my biology. And for me, putting my story on the page was basically my way of taking back the pen
Mm,
and my life. And for me, it's even bigger than my story. It's about how millions of us carry wounds that science now shows actually rewires our biology and impacts our health and our relationships for life. So I really felt strongly that I wanted my book to be a map, perhaps for someone else who is struggling with family dysfunction, family addiction, family violence, domestic violence, family secrets, and how to navigate that and how to reclaim your own life, to set boundaries and to heal yourself and to have an opportunity to live your best life in spite of
mm.
your family.
That's beautiful. I think what sticks with me from that is your recognition of the fact that for you, the art of writing this book, of being a writer, it was a healing step as well, which kind of fits in with your whole, trajectory in life of like moving closer and closer towards a healing sense of wholeness. And I like that because I think that art can be very healing, not just for the creator, but for the recipients of it and reading it. What part of your life and in your book do you think is most relatable to people who will read it?
One of the things that I really grappled with and that I had to sort out in therapy was why I even, stayed in my family for as long as I did, why I felt a need to try to fix my family or heal my family. I felt almost guilty about that I kept subjecting myself to my family's crazy. And then I was subjecting my husband and my son to that crazy, although Mateo was not really aware of a lot of the crazy until he was a teenager, thankfully.
Mm.
So I really grappled with that, and it really took a therapist saying to me, you know, as humans, we depend on the tribe. We depend on these people to care for us. That's how we survive. So, of course, it's your instinct to be dependent on them. And in spite of some choices that my mom made as a codependent, I adored my mother and I was very attached to her. And especially as the therapist pointed out, because my father died when I was 7, I was extra attached to my mother and terrified that she would either go away or disappear or die. And so I always wanted to just take care of her. And the therapist had to point out to me, too, that for a child who loses a parent at the age that I did at 7 is extremely detrimental, and that children fear that the other parent might die. So we do tend to want to take care of that parent. So whatever choices my mother made, such as, choosing my stepdad to be her husband and hence my father, I went along with it because I just wanted her to be happy. And for years, I had to accept him because that was her choice. So in order to have this relationship with my mom, I had to accept him. And then after my mother passed away, 11 years before my dad did, I thought, well, if he pulls any more shenanigans or is, violent again, I don't need him anymore because my mother's already gone. But once my mother died, I don't know why, he suddenly was trying more and more to become the father that I always hoped he would be. And what the therapist pointed out is that there were these moments of him being a really good father and a generous father and a sane father. And that is called intermittent reinforcement. And this is how addiction works for a lot of people, like in gambling, for instance, you win a little bit of money, that's intermittent reinforcement. And so, oh, you got the hit, you want to try again. And literally, like every, kind gesture or birthday card or saying, is intermittent reinforces, you hope that's going to happen again. And so that was the piece that I really needed to understand because I felt stupid. Like, why do I keep having any kind of relationship with this man who is violent and, verbally abusive? And the therapist explained that and said, not only that, but he's the only father that you ever really knew. And so, of course, we always want to try to take care of our parents. And you're a good daughter because you hung in there, and not only that, but as he was dying, you helped take care of him and made sure that he got proper care and hospice care and so on and so forth. So I guess, back to your question, what is just that, it feels very complicated sometimes with family because we're supposed to want to be attached to our family, and where our culture tells us, blood is thicker than water and, family comes first. But I've since learned that, sometimes, unfortunately, family can't come first. You have to come first.
Yeah. Interesting that you say your therapist called it intermittent
Reinforcement.
reinforcement. This is a concept I learned about in like my dog training experience, that when you train dogs,
Absolutely.
you reward them. You at first you reward them constantly, and then once they get good at that, then you reward them intermittently so that it's always the possibility is always there that they will get rewarded, so they have motivation to do it. And as dog trainers do that intentionally, but I don't think that people with PTSD and people with mental illnesses and other mental health problems intentionally provide. Like, I don't believe when I read this book that your stepfather was acting out of malice, intentionally doing that. I think it was his own trauma, probably the way he was raised. And, you do seem to have a lot of empathy for that when you think about the people in your life, about the world
Yeah.
that they lived in and how everyone was trying to improve upon the situation with the next generation, but it was still a lot to process. So I do think you're right. There's something relatable about that for all of us because not one family is perfect. Everyone has some skeletons in the closet, some hidden traumas, addictions, problems, communication situations, mental health issues, all of this. It is relatable. It was really
Yes.
enjoyable to see how you dealt with it all and how you grew from it. Um,
Yes, and the second part of your question, I think the answer is that I dug and dug to unearth the intergenerational trauma of both of my parents. I waited for 50 years to try to sort out what was wrong with my dad, what happened to him.
mhm,
I did know that he had a violent father and that he had been kicked out of the home when he was a mere adolescent and he had to go live on a neighboring farm and live in another farmer's barn and work for this farmer. And he had a pretty rough life. And when I dug even further, well, what happened to his dad? It wasn't until everybody was dead, but I reached out to a relative in Switzerland to learn that the grandparents who initially came over from Switzerland to Monroe, Wisconsin area and were cheese farmers, they came over with two boys. One of those would be my grandfather. And I had always heard that there was a daughter that had stayed in Switzerland, but that was it. That was all that was ever spoken about. And I assumed she was an older daughter and that she had been, maybe she was already married. So she stayed there. And for years, that's all I ever really heard about my dad's aunt, that she had stayed in Switzerland. Well, only to come to find out from her grandson, no, they left an a toddler, a child, a little girl in Switzerland because the father thought, I don't know, she would be too much trouble. She was a baby. And women in Switzerland didn't even have the right to vote until 1974.
mhm,
So this was probably not the mother's choice
mhm.
to leave her baby in Switzerland. I'm sure it was the overbearing, demanding husband who decided this. So I can only imagine the grief, the anger,
Mm,
the sadness in that house that this mother had to leave her baby. And so, I dug even further to try to figure out about
yeah.
the intergenerational trauma. And then my mother in her 70s confided in me that she had been sexually assaulted as a little girl repeatedly by a neighbor when she was younger, but she had never shared that. So, of course, that kind of trauma lived in her body and affected her
Mm,
decisions, affected her personality. So I do have a lot of empathy for
mm,
both of my parents for what they endured, but the reality is that it doesn't excuse when you're an adult,
sure.
your bad behavior. So for me, I just knew at a very young age that I was going to be the cycle breaker, that I was going to be the one to say, no more. This is the trauma ends with me and I'm going to heal myself and I will not pass this on to my child.
Yeah, and I think that is another relatable thing about our generation is that I feel like we are possibly the first generation, maybe the second in history that has had maybe like the self-awareness, the luxury of like maybe just not having to be constantly economically strained to the point where we couldn't even begin to focus on ourselves, in order to be able to think okay, what is wrong? Why isn't this working? Having that kind of access to even psychology textbooks, things like that. So
Hmm.
it was a very momentous era, starting probably in the 60s and 70s when that stuff started to develop more as a popular concept, so that we are
Yes.
lucky enough that
Yeah.
we have this. And we're,
Our generation is lucky. And my mother used to say to me, "Oh, Wendy, we didn't have Oprah when I was coming up."
exactly.
And the thing about the immigrant, story, as most immigrants, you've got to just suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah,
And there was a lot of like, we don't talk about the bad things. We got to just keep putting one foot in front of the other
that's
to
right.
survive. So they had to just repress a lot of stuff.
Well, that kind of takes me to an kind of naturally to one of my questions. It wasn't going to be my next question, but since we took that leap, um, that's very true, and I think that's still true of the immigrant experience today. You're so busy surviving that you have less time to focus on overall well-being. How does your wellness practice today help you process the disturbing current events that are happening worldwide? And do you see a time where equality and equity and inclusion will reach everyone in a way that is helpful?
Well, the current studies about adverse childhood experiences and how to heal from these experiences, I intuitively was drawn to
Mm,
nature, hiking, Buddhism, meditation, Native American spirituality, getting sober, going to 12-step meetings, writing, all of these practices. And now it turns out the work of Gabor Mate and Bessel van der Kolk and Nadine Burke and Peter Levine, all the work, they are saying these are the kinds of things that you can do to heal. Besides doing psychotherapy or talk therapy, we need to include the somatic
mm,
yoga, dancing, hiking, moving, singing, um, juggling, playing. We need to incorporate all of these things. It
mm,
isn't just talk therapy. So I practice these things still today. It does trigger me. The current administration does trigger me because my stepdad voted for that candidate, and that is personally affecting to me,
mm,
personally hurtful. But also, my stepdad was a bully, just like the current administration. So, a
mm,
lot about it triggers me, continues to trigger me. My family and I support a family in Palestine, for instance, so that they have food and water. And so I do what I can to make a difference. People like, bless her heart, Jane Goodall, who just passed away yesterday. I love listening to her talking about what gives her hope. And so people like her and Greta Thunberg, activists who put their lives and their minds and their bodies on the line, give me hope.
mhm,
And I do have to protect my central nervous system. Sometimes I have difficulty sleeping because of what is going on in the world today. And so I have to kind of protect my central nervous system because I do have complex CPTSD. I do have an anxiety disorder. So I try to do it when I know I've had enough, I've had enough. I try to stay active in theater, actually, and participate in theater. When the first time this administration happened, and I asked my son Mateo,
mm,
because I mostly want to know about our kids. What do you think about this, Mateo? What are we going to do about this? How do you feel about this? And he said, Mom, I'm just going to keep making art. let's just keep making art. And I feel like,
Yeah.
if you can make art, if you can support theater and the arts, that is a huge contribution because that's we need to do. We need our artists to be able to speak out. We need our comedians to be able to have freedom of speech. We need writers. We need to, watch what books are being banned and buy those books and read them. But yes, I think theater and art is very healing. So I try to participate in the arts as much as possible, also for my own
Yeah.
healing and my own sanity.
Yeah. It kind of seems like your philosophy is that, art can be an act of resistance as well. And that's another question I wanted to kind of talk to you about was, there's a lot of seeking in my pretty baby. And it reminded me I'm working on writing my first full-length play right now. And it's kind of fun and exciting. And my director asked me this question. Said, "What's the core question of your play? Like, let's focus on that so we can think about if everything relates back to that." And I find that to be a really tricky kind of question because, again, there's a lot of questions going on in our minds right now about the world and art and who we are. And it's hard to hone in on what's relevant, what's important about life. But when I read My Pretty Baby, I feel like you really dialed in on this core question. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. So for the sake of our listeners, I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on it, what it is for you.
I Well, I would love to hear, what do you think it was?
Hmm. Well, all right, I'll tell you first, and then you can.
Okay.
I think it definitely is around this idea of seeking and healing, but probably what stood out even more than that to me is, and this could just be me, my experience coming from a similar family and situation, but it seemed to me as if you were looking for yourself, you know, and you were wondering who you were, and you couldn't understand that until you understood who your parents were and why you weren't able to connect with them in a way that helped you know who you were at an earlier point in time. And so it seems to me that you have kind of a lost feeling, and that finding ways to connect through these somatic methods, through art, through community, is kind of like the way that you solve this riddle for yourself. Did I hit it?
Absolutely. Bingo.
Oh, good.
Bingo. Yes. I mean that, and I would say, finding myself, yes, but wanting to find truth
Mm,
and authenticity. And my whole life, I was shrouded also with secrets and
shame added to that.
shame.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I couldn't find who I was. Where was Wendy in all of this? And who am I? Um, and why do I feel like I don't fit in with these people? And who are these people that are raising me? Like I felt like I didn't even know who my parents were. Like
Yeah.
we never had authentic conversations. And I feel like a lot of us feel that way. We may feel lost and sort of isolated because we were so isolated in our own families. So seeking truth and being authentic. I mean, to this day, I really don't feel comfortable just having, chit-chatty kinds of conversations. I prefer having more authentic and talking about the kinds of things that you and I are talking about,
Yeah.
being real and talking about the state of the world and talking about how to survive in the world and how to be better people, how to be better stewards of the earth, how to be better parents,
Mm.
how to leave the world a better place than how we found it, when we leave. I just prefer authenticity to superficiality.
And yet you don't seem to have any of the like hallmark toxic positivity kind of traits that a lot of truth seekers sort of propose all the time. So I want to ask you, what regrets do you have?
Regrets?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk for a second before I get to that about toxic positivity. I'd like to say in her book of the same name,
Hmm.
Whitney Goodman calls, or her book is called Toxic Positivity, excuse
Hmm.
me. But in the Buddhist philosophy,
Hmm.
even in AA, when we deny pain, we deny healing.
Hmm.
So real resilience comes from facing what happened and not papering over it with a smile. And the beloved Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh said, the art of happiness is also the art of suffering well.
Hmm.
And we must acknowledge, allow, and embrace our suffering in order to heal it. And as Robert Frost also said, the only way out is through.
Hmm.
So toxic positivity really is just more repression of what is going on.
Yeah.
If there are regrets, my regret is that my family was healthier
Mm.
or that um, there was better communication in the family. I mean, it's not something that I did regret, but I do regret that my mother did not tell me about my bio father before she passed. I
Mm.
regret that
Not knowing that, yeah, until later.
she didn't even leave me a letter in her safety deposit box, that she didn't express to me what that relationship meant to her or any of that. That is a regret.
But
Um,
like turning inward a little bit, like for example, I recognize that I have a lot of trauma from my particular parental set that I got and the way things were passed down. And I'm not saying it was my fault, but because of the situation of how I learned to be in the world, also a caretaker for my mom, I think I was very non-confrontational because I also was afraid of losing that one connection. And so now I regret that it's taken me this long to learn to have better boundaries and be able to confront discomfort or problems that I might have in communication with other people. So that's like something that I recognize about myself that I need to work on. I'm just wondering, is there anything like that that you've come across in recent years that has been a struggle for you that you're like, wow, I wish I had started this earlier, or I have a ways to go with this still, or
well, I would say to you, congratulations that you're getting that awareness. I can't tell you not to regret that, but I kind of
right.
want to
Maybe
say, don't
maybe that
regret that.
word isn't the right
Just,
word because it sounds
yeah.
like I'm beating up on myself. But I'm just meaning like, how about a discovery? Is there any discoveries that you've had later in life about your healing journey that has been sort of like a aha moment in how you could change your perspective to help improve the situation?
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, really, so many. And what's wonderful is that I can, you know, discuss that with my son and my husband
Mhm.
to say, okay, I'm having a reaction of anxiety. I'm having some anxiety
Yeah.
now. This is triggering to me. So I wish that if I was going to say I regret or wish it had come sooner, is
Mhm.
m more of a compassion for myself.
Yeah.
I wish I had compassion sooner. I was always just trying to put on the happy face
Mhm.
and to act normal and to fit in and to be the people pleaser. And, why am I so sensitive? And judging myself, like, why am I so sensitive? And
Or
why
turning it
did
on
that
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, why am I so sensitive? Why did what they just said bother me? Like it was always like something's wrong with me, which was what I felt my entire life. There must be something wrong with me for my stepfather to be this violent towards me or for my siblings to sort of reject me. There must be something wrong with me. So it's taken me a lot of work and a lot of healing to realize I am lovable
Hmm.
and to have compassion for myself and to know that this is going to be a practice I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm never going to be completely healed of this. I mean, a lifetime of these messages bombarding you and having CPTSD, it takes a lot of work to heal that. But I can catch myself earlier, I guess. I can say, wow, I'm having some anxiety. That tone of voice, it makes me afraid because, it is sort of a flashback to my stepdad and his violence. Like, please don't talk to me that way.
Mm.
Are you mad at me? What's the tone of voice? Like, I can have that conversation like with my husband, and he's not maybe even aware of it. He's had to learn that he's living with a person whose central nervous system was highly damaged, and my fight or flight was on full blast
Yeah.
for most of my life. And so he needs to be aware of that and be respectful of that. And that, I guess, is lots of discoveries about that.
Right.
But I'm grateful that I've come to a place where I accept and I have compassion for my central nervous system.
That's beautiful.
And yeah,
So if there was a time machine, you would maybe be willing to travel back and tell yourself that a little bit sooner and give yourself a
yes,
little less grief. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yes.
What what about like what aspects of your life so far are you proudest of? I feel like you might have just kind of touched on them, but I just want to make sure.
Well, I'm proud that I was determined to save myself.
Mm.
And when I left home at 17 and went to California, I got myself in college. No one helped me do that. And I was like a dry sponge. There were so many things that I had missed or lacked growing up. Culture, music, art, theater. I just wanted to learn everything, and I went to college an extra year on the Social Security and Veterans benefits from my dead father because I just wanted to learn. And I am a lifelong learner,
Mm.
and I continue to want to learn and grow, and I will until I die. So I'm I'm proud of myself that as Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss, that I have followed my bliss, that if something was really pulling to me, I would seek it out and I would learn about it. Or, like getting into the music industry. I really wanted to be in the music industry. So I figured a way to get into the music industry, and things that scared me, I still did. And I saw a book in a bookstore one time, and all I did was read the cover. I never actually read the book, but I got it. The the title of the book is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I stood there going, wait, you mean people actually are afraid to do some of the things that they do? Like, I just assumed that all these people that were doing all these amazing things, they just had absolutely no fear
Mm.
about doing it. And it was such a revelation to me to think, oh, you mean people feel afraid to do things, but they do them anyway? Okay.
Mm.
So I think I'm very proud that I was tenacious and kept digging into my family story to kind of sort out where the genesis of the trauma came from, what happened in my family. And I'm very proud that I have found and created my own chosen family, starting with Ignacio and Mateo, and good friends who are also on similar journeys.
That's beautiful. And what a family they are. They're very special
Thank
people.
you.
What message do you think Chicagoans in particular, but maybe all readers will take away from My Pretty Baby? Is there some little nugget in there? Think about our winters over here, or the political invasion that Chicago's currently undergoing, or, is it about determination? Is it about lifelong learning, discovery, healing, all these things?
I think in general, what I hope readers take away from my story is the acknowledgement that they're not alone. 61% of US adults have at least one out of the 10 adverse childhood experiences, or two-thirds of adults have some adverse childhood experience. And even if you were not personally affected, chances are your partner, your neighbor, your best friend, your coworker, someone has been affected. And I really wrote My Pretty Baby as a call to action for us to be able to have these kinds of conversations and to be honest and to be truthful and to seek out healing. That trauma is universal, but so is healing. And telling the truth about what happened isn't about blame or retribution. It's about breaking cycles and healing, especially if you have children. I believe that one of the greatest gifts that you can give your children is being a cycle breaker yourself. And I think that healing isn't just possible, it's contagious in the best sense of the word. So let's spread the word.
No, that is so beautiful, Wendy. I love that. I love that thought that you just expressed. Yes, that wraps up your book. So delighted that I got a chance to talk to you today about your book. It's going to be coming out very soon, right? When is it released?
November 4th, and it is available for pre-order already on all of the channels, Bookshop, Barnes & Noble, Simon & Schuster, Amazon. So you can pre-order it.
Great.
And it will be available November 4th. And for those of you in Chicago, I do hope to be coming to Chicago for another event. I have events here in Denver, and then I fly to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Aspen, Colorado, and then I'll be going to Tucson for a conference. But I hope to come next September to Printers Row,
Yes.
and then we'll be having a party at my friend's art gallery, and we'll be celebrating My Pretty Baby for as long as I can.
That sounds like a book tour and a plan to me. I will be at that party. It's amazing. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much for being my guest today, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful, and I can't wait to listen to it and to let everyone know about it.
Same here. I will spread the word as far and wide as I can. Thank you, Wendy.
You're so welcome.
Thanks again to Kim Campbell and Wendy Correa for this insightful conversation. Be sure to look for some of our other podcast episodes, including my recent review of Ashland Avenue, playing now at the Goodman Theater. And as always, if you enjoy what we have to offer, please be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast to be alerted when new content is added. This is Reno Lovison, executive producer at Chicago Broadcasting Network.